People to please have their phones on silent, and we'll possibly take a morning break at 11 a.m. depending on how we go this morning. So I'd just like to actually start this meeting this morning by asking Councillor Councillor Kai Fong to start us with a karakia, please.
Morena koutou, ki enoi tātou, tuitaua mai runga, tuitaua mai raro, tuitaua mai roto, tuitaua mai waho, kia taua ai te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tae ki.
Thank you, Councillor Kai Fong. I'd like to now call for apologies. I have one from Councillor Maxwell. I have an apology for lateness from Councillor Kiriopa, and we have Councillor Brown, who I believe is joining us online. Just got here. Good morning, Councillor Brown. Nice to see you. And we have CE Moraes online with us as well. Good morning to you all. I'd like to actually ask that the apologies for Councillor Maxwell be accepted. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Waru and Councillor O'Brien. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you. Move on to item number 3, which is the declarations of interest. Do I have any declarations of interest this morning? Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Chair. Just a potential non-financial conflict of interest in the confidential section, which I will raise when we move into confidential.
Thank you, and that has been noted. Thank you. Any other declarations of interest, councillors? There appear to be none. Any urgent items that are not on the agenda this morning? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been approached by a number of concerned ratepayers who are seeking clarification of the areas proposed to have their water supplies fluoridated. So would it be possible for Council to publish an infographic or a map of some description just showing the suburbs that are included in the first tranche? They don't quite understand what central and eastern means. I mean, I think I've asked this question before and it does relate to our stormwater catchment map, but if that could be potentially published by Council just to clarify what those areas are, and then perhaps a second one showing the areas that will be included in the second tranche. Just as perhaps an action point for staff, if that could be done, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. It's possibly not an urgent item, but I understand what you're saying and the concerns of the community and wanting to know that. We might just defer that to Stavros' report, which is later on, and maybe ask that question again, and he can provide some more background on that, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other urgent items, councillors? Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could I just signal, and I'm happy to wait for Stavros' report, I have 2 minor issues, but again, since Stavros is giving a report today, I'll be happy to put those aside. One dealing with the around the dangerous dam submissions that are currently being undertaken by a regional council, and also roading affected by Nongataha developments. So I'm happy to put those aside till Stavros' report, if it's...
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. So the dangerous dams policy, that's a Bay of Plenty Regional Council
yes,
one,
that's correct.
And the roading in Nongataha.
Correct. And I was going to raise those as minor, but I'm happy to wait for Stavros' report if you'd prefer.
Okay, shall we do that?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. We'll do that. Noted. Any other urgent items, councillors? There appear to be none. Thank you. We'll move on now to items 5, which is the minutes. Confirmation of the minutes from the last meeting. Could I have a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Infrastructure Environment Committee meeting held on the 3rd of July 2024 be confirmed as a true and correct record, please? Councillor Wang and Councillor Waru, or are there any matters for correctness? There appear to be none. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That is carried. Thank you. Moving along to item number 6, we have a petition this morning, and I'd like to welcome Te Atawhai Aroha, who are going to present to us this morning. We have Richard Bird and a whole group of people, including members of the public, who have come along to support Richard this morning on this petition around natural burials. Richard, you probably understand that you'll have 5 minutes to speak to us. I might just give you a little indication when you're getting close to 4 minutes, just to give you a little wave to let you know you're getting close to the end of the 5 minutes. and then I'll ask you to close. So I'll leave it in your capable hands.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia koutou nā kai kaunuhira, tēnā koutou. Firstly, we've all come off the back of a national hui for compassionate communities over the weekend, which was fantastic, and of course natural burial was a hot topic in that hui, so it's sort of fitting that today follows that weekend hui. Thank you for considering our trust, Te Atawhai Aroha Trust's long-term plan submission on natural burial, and thank you also for today's opportunity to present this petition to you, requesting Council to establish a natural burial site for the public of Rotorua. Our LTP submission documented the environmental, economic and cultural benefits of natural burial, and presenting this petition serves to keep this kaupapa on your agenda as councillors. The petition that we still continue to circulate to capture support for this kaupapa currently has 396 signatures, which we've collected over the last 4 months. In our experience, natural burial resonates strongly with a large sector of our community, and support for it is growing as more and more people come to understand its real benefits. We are mindful that the long-term plan submission process highlighted Ngāti Whakaue's expectations in relation to Kauai Cemetery, and that this makes the need for additional cemetery capacity in the next 2 to 3 years even more urgent and pressing. We appreciate Council's decision not to include natural burial site in the long-term plan, but for it to be considered in the context of Council's plans to develop further cemetery capacity. So the land currently owned by Council at Tarukinga for cemetery purposes, we have viewed, we're familiar with it, and we can see that there are large sloping areas of this land bordering existing native bush that would be ideally suited for natural burial. These could be made available with minimal capital expenditure on behalf of Council. It would require little more than converting a farm track into a metalled road, along with the establishment of a landscape plan, but then Council would need a landscape plan for the cemetery anyway. We highlighted in our LTP submission that Ngāti Tuta Tanako support natural burial and are willing to provide to ensure suitable land is provided for this as part of a wider conservation estate. If not on land that Council already owns at Tarukinga, then on other land that they own. I might add that we have apologies from Joe Edwards from Tuta Tanako, who was intending to be with us today to show their support for this petition. I guess we want you as councillors to know that Te Atawhai Aroha is committed to working with Rob Pitkethly and his team and with Ngāti Tuta Tanako to ensure the provision of natural burial in the development of additional cemetery space. We have already had informal meetings with Rob and some members of his team. The Trust is also committed to working in partnership with Council to operationalise a natural burial site by educating our community. In addition, we have potential to leverage our broad community networks and philanthropic funding support to ensure our community has access to natural burial as a more affordable, environmentally beneficial and culturally appropriate way to inter their loved ones in hallowed ground. So now, we physically present to you our petition, signed physically or electronically by nearly 400 signatories. There are some signatories who do not necessarily live in Rotorua, but who whakapapa to or have strong ties to Rotorua and an intention for Rotorua to be their final resting place by way of natural burial. What we need from you as councillors and as a council is to play your part to prioritise the inclusion of a natural burial site in plans for future cemetery capacity, and for that to happen with urgency in the next 2 to 3 years. I think I'm under my time, so I'm welcome to have questions.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank
Perfectly
you.
timed, yes. Is there any questions of clarification for Richard and Sarah? Yes, me Tapsell.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your efforts on the petition in the long-term plan submission and also to present today. Just a quick question around the road. Would that be on private land or public land? Obviously, councils do invest money into public land, and I wonder if it is on private land, is there any additional financial support to pay for that metal road that you've talked about?
So the metal road I referred to was on land that council currently owns at Tarukinga, so it's public land, and it's land that's designated for cemetery purposes. There is actually a farm track on that piece of land that goes to the back of the property where the bush, sloping bush clad hills are.
Sorry, just a quick final question. Do you know how much capacity that land may have for natural burials, understanding that the land needed for a natural burial is quite a bit more than a normal plot in a cemetery?
I can't give you a technical answer to that other than to say heaps.
Okay, great.
So
Thank you.
there's lots and lots of sloping land that would be, Rob could probably give you a number of sloping land that would be suitable for natural burial. It sits alongside traditional burial, which of course requires flat land. Yeah.
Thank you for your answers. Are there any further questions, councillors? Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for your time, and I acknowledge the receipt of your petition, and thank you to all those that signed it. We acknowledge the fact that you wish to further develop the capacity of the cemetery at Tarukinga for natural burials, and we'll watch this space as we go forward with our cemetery planning. Thank you very much for your time. Nice to see you too. Right, councillors, we'll now move on to item number 7, the staff reports. I'd like to ask for a mover and a seconder that the Infrastructure and Environment Progress Report be received, please. Thank you, Councillor Kaifong. Seconded by Councillor O'Brien. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried, thank you. We're on page 24 of your agendas. I'd like to ask Stavros, excuse me, to provide us with an overview and some main points that he might like to share with us. Thank you. Stavros, over to you.
Good morning. Morena tatu katoa. Through you, Madam Chair, I would take the report as read, but if Madam Chair, I would be allowed to make a few comments on what I think are important activity areas for which elected members probably deserve some more detailed information, and after that I would be more than happy to take any questions related to the actual progress report which relates to the last month of the last financial year, or in June 2024. I would start with some key areas on activity basis. First of all, wood transport. Pleased to report that the end of the financial year of 23-24 has seen us completing all our business plan activities, our resurfacing, our renewal programs, and our general proactive and reactive maintenance works. As you're aware, during the financial year also we had some weather impacts, which in the terms of transport activity, generally they are reactive and responsive to the particular weather events. We have ongoing agreements with NZTA to ensure that we get an appropriate financial support when we have to restore and reinstate damages from the weather. And also, the unpredictability of those events make it very difficult to have an accurate budgeting on a year-to-year basis for that. But nevertheless, we managed to rectify most of the damages that we have encountered last year. A couple of things with regards to the current year and the next 3 years, actually. The National Land Transport Fund application that Council made was consistent with our long-term plan considerations. We had 3 tranches of funding requests. One relates to our general maintenance and renewal activities of road, carriageway, and capping and related assets, and the funding allocation made by the National Land Transport Fund to the Council is somewhat less than what we have asked, but nevertheless, for the next 3 years, we have a reasonable funding allocation for our National Land Programme to continue and deliver our long-term plan. There are 2 tranches of work that are of concern at this point in time. We have been notified last week that one tranche of work relating to the maintenance and renewal of footpaths and shared paths and safety education programs. The funding allocation is only about 1/3 of what we have asked, and the consequence of that will be under the current funding envelope we have with that National Land Transport Programme will only allow us to do reactive maintenance and repairs to those assets of about 600 kilometers of footpaths and shared paths, and obviously we will curtail the amount of educational work for road safety activities that we're undertaking. For your information, if that funding shortfall was to substitute it by local share, it probably means somewhere in the region of an extra $800,000 a year by the Council to backfill that gap. We're still talking to NZTA and the NLTP to see what options we have there. We've been advised that the government's approach is ring-fencing these activities, and the funding allocation for that is boxed in and highly unlikely to get extra funding. So the approach taken at the moment is to concentrate on repairs and maintenance until we identify any other options. It's another tranche that is due to come on the first week of September, and that relates to the general and minor safety improvement programs. The works we undertake to improve intersections, pedestrian crossings, speed humps, speed limits, and all these activities. We have not had any advice on that yet, and as I said, the funding allocation will be notified to us on the 1st of September. But once we have that, I will give you an advice as to where we are with those, programs of work and how it compares to our ability to deliver works. I also want to make in terms of transport, I wanted to make some comments, with regards to the General National Funding Programme and the Regional Land Transport Plan that's been discussed, in recent times. I've read some comment while I was away about some reasons why our 5 priorities, we identified for the district have been taken a lower funding priority compared to the region. And one of the comments that has been made by the committee and received by members of our community, it was that one of the reasons that some of those priority projects were not given high priority compared to other regional programs because the Rotorua Lakes Council did not dedicate enough local funding for these projects. I would like to state very clearly here that is an incorrect approach. I would like also to remind elected members, or those who you've been here, or those of you who are new, that back in 2016, this council had agreed with the NZTA to lift the designation of the Rotorua Eastern Arterial route. That was, NZTA advised us that we were not able to give effect to it because they simply did not own all the land. In exchange for that agreement, NZTA and Rotorua Lakes Council has agreed to a project or a program of work called Connect Rotorua. That Connect Rotorua project anticipated that NZTA and the Crown will continue to improve the state highways in our districts. That involves State Highway 30, State Highway 5, State Highway 33, the State Highway 38, Inner City Amohau Street, and the State Highway 5 all the way to Nongotaha and through the Nongotaha village. And the understanding was that those state highways were going to be gradually upgraded to the appropriate function of a state highway, to enable our economic, residential and tourism industry and connectivity into Rotorua. As you know, State Highway 30 or the Tinai Road has completed stage 1 and now is in progress for stage 2. Stage 2 has got 3 phases, and the third phase will be all the way to the airport, for learning the airport or the road to the airport and improve the intersection with the airport and Eastgate. Of course, the other priorities we have identified were improvements to Red Stag, Wapa, State Highway 30 intersection all the way to Himo, State Highway 5 all the way to Ferry Springs safety improvements, and from Ferry Springs to Nongodaha 4 laning all the way to Nongodaha roundabout and through the Nongodaha village for safety improvements as the Nongodaha village is growing in development. We also have requested, we have stated significantly the expectation since 2016 that the State Highway from Himo Gorge to Sala Street and from Sala Street to Tinai Road was going to be upgraded in anticipation that State Highway 38 will be relocated one day, and we want to divert heavy traffic away from the central city and through that particular area. And of course, State Highway 30A, the Amahau, will only agree to revocation once the NZTA has spent the appropriate investment into it to bring it to a state of an arterial route that is consistent with our future development strategy. So those improvements are on state highways. They do not depend on the local funding. It's not up to Rotorua Lakes Council to invest money on state highways. NZTA is fully cognizant of those expectations. I understand that State Highway 30A funding, about $37 million, has been one of the priorities, has been funded. We're way to get advice on that. But when you consider the role of a regional balanced approach to growth and investments, and consider the allocation of regional funds into state highways, and the fact that Rotorua, that has about 30% of the population of the region, only receives 3% of that state highway investments, then really I think there's an unbalanced investment for regional funds in the state highways. It's not up to us or Rotorua Lakes Council to invest in state highways. It's up to NZTA and the regional committee to consider a balanced allocation of available funds, limited as they might be, in a way that reflects population demand and a balance and reasonable growth expectation for all the areas. So I reiterate the statement made by some people that those priorities were given lower weighting compared to Tauranga or Western Bay of Plenty is really incorrect, and we have expected the NZCA to promote the priorities we have agreed since 2016. On the funding side, we expect the funding to allow improvements to Malfroy and State Highway Old Tapo roads over the next 3 years, and as I said, the State Highway 38 funding should be given effect over the next 3 years too, and of course that will enable and support of financial strategy. The future development strategy. In terms of the water activity, I'm very pleased to again inform our elected members that for the 6th year, I believe at this point in time, we have managed to get full certification of compliance with drinking water standards. And that means all our activities as a council have met the maintenance, renewal, operational requirements to meet those drinking water standards. It is not a small achievement. It is a significant achievement because when you look into the rationale for the Three Waters reforms, one of the platforms for that is that drinking water quality and reliability is not consistent across the country. And for us, meeting those drinking water standards consistently for the last 6 years is a test, it's a test of reliability for our communities. I think it's good to note that. We also managed to complete all our renewal programs for about 800 kilometers of pipelines and pumping stations in the water supply system. And over the next month, you will receive proposals and contract recommendations to continue the renewal program for the next year. In terms of wastewater activities, I would like to note that our main platform for enabling our effective management of wastewater generated by our community. The treatment plant upgrade is progressing. As usual, there are always going to be some technical sort of challenges in that respect, but the box of the treatment plant is progressing quite well, and we expect that to be completed and ready by 2026 as per program. Also, elected members, as you are aware, we still have the question mark about the conveyance of that recovered water from the treatment plant facility to a final discharge point. At this point, we do not have an agreed discharge point, and I expect that we will bring back to the Council a proposal to consider various options for that discharge point over the next couple of months, so we can create a reference group where we can sit down together with Mana Whenua and relevant stakeholders to consider where we're heading for that, as our bridging consent for the forest expires in 2026 too, and therefore we need to have some alternative option that is viable, sustainable, environmentally and culturally perspectives. Wastewater reticulations, Rotoiti Rotomai, as you know, is at the practical completion phase. We've got about 60 Whenua Maori properties that are going still through the Maori court to identify the legal authorities to agree to the consenting or installation of systems onto those properties. And we've got about 10 properties over there in Rotoiti, especially East Rotoiti, that refuse to agree to installation of the systems. We are now preparing with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council a regulatory approach to those, to those 10, 12 properties, to work with them to install. The second reticulation program is a Tarawera reticulation system network. As you are aware, in July, we had the hearing about the injunction to progress the pipeline through the Tarawera roads. And that injunction, the judge made a decision, a clear decision, that the council is got within its rights, to commence installing the pipeline onto Tarawera Road near the Lake Rotokakahi. That work will commence on the 19th of August, and we are preparing with our contractors and the relevant parties, to do that work. It will take about 3 weeks to complete it, while at the same time, we're working on a set of the pump stations, technical design and specifications to accommodate what we call a progressive commissioning of stage 2 of Tarawera. So as effluent is pumped into the system, the pumps are able to pump it from a low volume to a high volume in due course. So stage 1 is expected to be completed by end of October. Also would like to note a couple of other points for stage 2. As you know, we have agreed to a tender for the installation of stage 2. The contractor is now working together with, within the community to obtain agreements to construct locality plans for each property. Locality plans are important because without a locality plan that defines where the grinder pumps go and the system goes, we cannot get a building consent, for these facilities. Unfortunately, I want to report that we have some resistance by property owners for stage 2. It's my understanding that there is an expectation that by refusing to allow access to the property to construct a locality plan and to obtain the building consents, the objective is to frustrate the progress of stage 2. I have spoken to community representatives and I have advised them that there might be 2 tangible consequences of that. One, which is definite, if the contract gets frustrated, there will be increased costs onto the project. And of course, those increased costs will be borne by the property owners in that area. The second element, which is entirely up to the discretion of the council, and I will come back to you over the next 2-3 months with some direction to that respect. If that contract gets frustrated, council may have to consider alternatives to that stage 2 installation, and we may have to utilize a regulatory approach to that, for which council may want to consider allowing each property owner or requiring every property owner to install the system themselves and obtain all the necessary building consents and bear all the cost of that activity. Because if the contract gets frustrated, it's highly possible that the general cost of the project will increase, and obviously we need to protect the rest of the ratepayers of the community. So that's my advice to the community representatives. The community representatives advise that the action by some property owners is related to trying to compel council to make, at this point in time, a commitment to put more money towards the Tarawera. My advice to them is that the council is not in a position to consider that until the project is constructed and completed, and at the time of considering the targeted rates, council will consider their options in balance with all the other commitments council has. So this is for your information. I'm just bringing it up in an open forum, so you are aware of where we are with that, with that process. But I will continue to give you advice and information over the next 2-3 months, and then we'll seek your direction at the appropriate time. Stormwater. Again, pleased to report that stormwater management is a significant activity that should enable our future development strategy. We are at the moment moving towards consolidating our 69 current stormwater consents we've got into one single comprehensive stormwater consent. I'm pleased to note that we are working collaboratively with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and the hearing for that comprehensive stormwater consent is scheduled for the 12th of November. And I've got every expectation that together with the Regional Council and discussions with Manawhenua, that consent will be granted. So we have certainty how stormwater is managed and how that stormwater management enables our future development strategy. We've still got some significant challenges at the technical level. The Stormwater Master Plan has to now traverse existing facilities, for example, working in the central and western areas where our residential properties, and retrofitting the system is not always technically without challenges. We also work with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council to ensure that their part in managing the system, i.e. Streams, water courses, Hina rivers, lake levels, and so on, also play a part in the total stormwater management plan. And we set up a process for which we share information and we share objectives, and we'll work together to ensure the achievement of the objectives of the stormwater. In terms of another major activity, as you're aware, we've got the Three Waters reforms. The legislation for stage 2 of the repealing of the previous legislation is expected to take place in September this year. And following that enactment of the legislation, Council has to advise the Department of Internal Affairs whether we intend to collaborate with other TLAs to construct let's say, a joint CCO of the region, or we go alone. It's expected that on the 4th of September, we'll provide to the committee a report recommending a direction to start constructing a service delivery plan for the Three Waters, and that will require to be completed within 12 months of the enactment of the legislation in September. We are ready to do that, and the report will come to this committee on the 4th of September to that effect. Open spaces, again, you see from the report a number of activities in maintaining and improving and renewing a range of assets in this area of activities are outlined. And the Council, obviously, in the near future, will consider what we call the PARS strategy for the future activities or sporting activities in order to define a set of goals for that strategy. And of course, those goals will inform the development of a potential program of works to inform the next long-term plan in 2030. So the strategy objectives will work out through a workshop with elected members, and following that, a proposed strategy will be submitted for adoption by the Council, and that strategy will be the platform, the foundation of developing our program or the potential program of works for the next long-term plan. Thank you for your patience, and more than happy to take any questions you have. I know that some inquiries made earlier, so happy to respond to any of these questions that, in the report or in relation to the questions that were raised earlier. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Stavros, for overviewing those extra points. Perhaps we'll just take questions first on the report. Is there anything specifically, Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report, Stavros. Welcome back. Page 29, talking about the Rotorua situation. Marae committees to be advised, Council has made final funding allocations in line with scope of the tenders and no additional funding will be provided for high capacity systems installation. Would you mind clarifying what that means, please?
Yeah, sure, Councillor Patterson. As you're aware, Council and consider the final stage of the Rotorua scheme. On that basis of the final projected cost of the scheme, you have struck the targeted rate for it, and you have provided additional funding to support, the property owners. There are 7 marae in the area, which under the Ngāti Pikiao and Council agreement are required to install pre-treatment systems. That currently they've got septic tanks. They need to move into a pre-treatment system as required by the resource consents and the obviously agreement with Ngāti Pikiao. There has been an allocation in terms of the tenders, assessing the needs of pre-treatment for each marae on the basis of the size of the marae and the population of that, that helps, and the community helps. There has been some debate between the Council and the EU liaison group as to what is the capacity that should be installed for it marae. Should that capacity be in a way that accommodates the average demand for those facilities, or for the 1 in 10-year event that will attract 2,000 people, for example? If we adopt the option of creating a capacity for a one-off event, every 10 years, the costs for installation far exceeds what the tender process was. We also believe there will be significant operational problems because these pre-treatment systems are based on vermicomposting, worms. If they remain unused for long periods of time, the worms will die and they need to be replenished continuously. So we're discussing with the marae committees what is a reasonable approach to that. For example, a reasonable approach would be to have pre-treatment system for the black wastewater, toilets and so on, but divert grey water through a different process to avoid having an excessive capacity at a high cost that's outside the tendered approaches, and therefore the community incur additional costs. So that's the discussion we have at this point in time.
Thank you. So just to clarify, there is still ongoing discussions with those marae. At this point, we haven't said no more funding. You're going to have to find the balance. We haven't come to that.
No, haven't come to that stage yet, but our baseline is that we are informed by your decisions in terms of setting the gross cost of the scheme, and therefore we assume that's the cost, that's the budget that were available for that. If the demand is going to be for cost in excess of that, then I will not make that decision until I come back to this committee and seek your direction to that effect.
Thank you. Just one more question. Just this is getting back to the sport issue. I had a few conversations about the energy event centre, so maybe Rob might be able to answer this. That when it comes to utilising the sports dome for basketball, that's fine, no problem. But as soon as we try to move into the energy event centre, the issue that they face is that the venue can't be compartmentalised and closed off from the rest of it. So therefore, you have to hire security guards, which adds extra cost to the hireage. Is that true?
I'm not entirely sure. Rob, you have anything to add to that?
Rob will come and answer that question for you, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Yes, my understanding is that there is a physical problem in creating that barrier, so there does need to be a level of security there. It's not a big pile of security guards. It's simply just making sure that there's not a move through to an area, a large area that's not being used.
We investigated, sorry, one more question. Have we investigated the way the building is structured at the moment to see if there are different pathways that could be used instead of coming in the main doors, they come in the back door, or something like that, just to make it more, I guess you could say, controlled, so that we can limit access to those other areas that currently are open and therefore we need security for? Is there any way to manage that?
You might need to change out your mic, or is it?
I'll have to chase that up, councillor, to find out. I'm not sure what investigation levels have been done to, with the building structure, so I can chase that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is it satisfactory that we'll just report back to you, Councillor Patterson, on that? Now, I might go to C. Moraes online. You've got your hand up there, Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to add some comments to Stavros's response on the cost of the marae treatment systems for Rotorua scheme. Councillor Patterson, during the long-term plan deliberations, this matter was discussed at some length, and the intent during those deliberations was to set the capital rate, and in order to do that, the total cost of the scheme had to be finalised in order to give cost certainty to all the property owners that were paying towards it. At that point, there was a decision that needed to be made about what the level of capital investment was for each marae, and there was an update that there was a range of different views about what that should be. As Stavros has outlined, the level of capital provision, which is borne by the overall scheme costs rather than the individual marae, was fixed at that point, and that's what Stavros is referring to, communicating that to the marae concerned. And as I said, it was discussed during the long-term plan deliberations in order to fix the overall capital cost of the scheme. Hopefully those additional comments help add a bit more to the response you already got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Were there any other questions for Stavros or Rob? Yes, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, thank you very much for your very helpful report, Stavros, and welcome back from holiday. First, could I deal with your report and your comments that you've made about Ngongataha? Could I just ask you to clarify the actual Ngongataha village, again, being part of a state highway, where does responsibility for safety, etc., like that, and roadworks lie? Is that with NZTA or with us?
Councillor O'Brien, I think the answer to that is a mixed approach to that. A couple of 2-3 years ago, when we developed 2-3 options for safety improvement in Ngongataha village, and we have agreed with NZTA that Rotorua Lakes Council contribution to that would be around the footpaths and the configuration of pedestrian movement in that area. But the state highway itself needs improvements in terms of, actually, it's very noisy, for example. The resurfacing of the surface of the road needs improvements, roundabouts, for the intersections, to slow down traffic. That's definitely their responsibility. What they're saying at this point in time is that the funding allocation does not allow them to do that investment.
Okay, so could I just clarify? So, in terms of, say, pedestrian crossings, so do we take a mixed approach to that, or is that strictly NZTA's provision?
Well, NZTA controls the corridor, and I believe it's our view that it's their responsibility to provide a safe, crossing point, for pedestrians in that area.
Thank you. So I've been talking with a couple of people from Progress organisations, and they've showed me at least 4 different consultations that we've had with the Ngongataha public and community or village about various options and feedback with their community. And the overall consensus seems to be that nothing's happened. Now, taking COVID into account, of course, a lot was impacted by that. But if I have a concern, Madam Chair, that if we're going to have, forgive me, I think it's close to 200 homes in an initial development being planned at, I think, fairly short time frame. If there's additional homes, and I understand there's talk of additional developments, at what stage do we say, here's the plan for Ngātaha, because it's already a very busy route, and if we keep adding, homes, we say growth will pay for growth. I have a real concern here that, and I'm not quite sure how we address it, whether we look at the annual plan and have some form of steering group or project group, but I'm very concerned that we could be putting in development which we can't service now, which will just lead to a gridlock of some sort. And people will look back at this council and say, why didn't you take the steps that others have failed on? That's not a criticism at all. I'm just concerned that, for me as a councillor, I don't see that we're making the plans or progress on this.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. If I may say, I share that, that concern. It's not, there's no debate about it. Myself and my chief executive, we are meeting with the NZTA, the regional manager, in a couple of weeks' time, and we'll bring that, again, to their attention. I think it may be an option as growth in Ngātaha is putting, for us to consider in our next annual plan or whatever, to do some interventions that we consider to be essential to enable some safety improvements, while at the same time continue to require from NZTA to take the responsibilities on the state highway itself. We can continue to do that work. However, also need to be pragmatic and advise you, as I said earlier, this third tranche of our National Land Transport Program for funding relates to minor safety improvements. And if I am informed by the allocation for maintenance of footpaths and shear paths and safety education programs downgraded to 1/3 of what we have asked, I really am concerned how much allocation will provide for us for minor safety improvements. But I will share with you at the appropriate time. But in terms of your concerns, I share them. And the question is that where is the fair balance or boundary between a state highway agency, a crown agency, and the local ratepayer, and we need to make sure that we protect the local ratepayer too.
All right, thank you. Madam Chair, on page 8 of our agenda, we had also a action point there in regards to an issue around the water rates and a number of properties, and I wonder if we could address that now, if that's okay, unless it was further along, but there is an action point recorded. No,
that's fine. There is some commentary in the report, but are you happy to give us a bit of an overview of the Himarana and Karakara
yes,
issue?
so thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I wanted to clarify you're talking about that. Again, while I was away, it's been identified that about 100 properties in Hamurana area. Their meter reading was unfortunately estimated for the previous 2-3 months by the meter reader instead of doing the actual readings, and as a result, when they got the last charge for water usage, it was a spike. And they had to pay, and of course people said, well, we used to pay that, now have a spike. What's the difference? What has been identified is that unfortunately the meter reader, instead of actually doing the reading, did an estimate and estimated on the low side, and therefore, when the actual reading took place later on in May, there was a significant discrepancy. Now, the issue was identified and the causes were identified. We have communicated with all these affected properties. We have arranged with our properties to adjust their charges without any additional imposition to them. There were credits issued or the billing process. The meter reader has been disciplined, and actions were taken by Infracore to avoid that from happening in the future. And obviously right now we require photographic evidence of every meter reading to make sure we actually get an actual reading instead of an estimate. That was the background to that. we have to take responsibility for that. We have addressed each individual affected property owner. We believe we arrived at a solution that, it recognizes the mistake we have made, and there's no financial imposition on these property owners.
Yes.
Thank you for that answer. Could I ask you, so in terms of fees being recouped, what sort of figures are we talking about? What's the highest that we're seeking to recover? Are we talking hundreds? Are we talking maybe best part of 1,000?
No.
Are you able to give me a...
No, my understanding, and I can't give you an accurate figure, Councillor O'Brien, but my understanding is, for a property, it would be in the hundreds of dollars. Really.
Okay, thank you. And I take it, sorry, I shouldn't, can you confirm for me we won't be charging any interest on those payments or anything?
I confirm with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Thank you for your answers on that and for clarifying how we have dealt with that situation, which is most unfortunate for the landowners up that way. Now, I've got another question from Councillor Waru, and then we can end Councillor Kia.
Kia ora, Stavros, Rob Morena. Thank you for the report, Stavros, as usual, very thorough and actually a pleasure to read. Just want to say, tagging on to the end of what Councillor O'Brien just asked you in terms of the water meter readings, was that issue only isolated to Haimurana, or are there other areas that have also been impacted by this?
Thank you, Councillor Waro. I'm not aware of any other areas. I understand that an assessment was made and identified just about 100 properties in Haimurana, and as I said to Councillor O'Brien, it was our mistake. We accepted it was our mistake. Doesn't matter who did the work, or not, and we addressed it.
No, thank you, and I appreciate that answer too, because we got to take responsibility for those things, and they've been fixed and sorted. So thank you for that. Okay, getting on to my actual questions I had now. In terms of the Regional Land Transport Program, it says here it's been endorsed by the Regional Transport Committee and adopted by the Bay of Plenty Regional Committee, and the key outcomes are listed in your report. Just wondering, in terms of, how do I word this? How did it stack up? How does Rotorua stack up, the key things, the outcomes that we got from that program against, let's say, a tauranga or whakatane in the region?
Well, the facts are that of the available funding for state highway improvements, over 90% went to Tauranga Western Bay. We receive about 2 to 3% of the available funding. One would argue that there's limited funding, but when you do a balanced distribution, and when you do aspire to distribute investment in order to achieve a balanced growth in the area, you would think for a district that almost 30% of the population, you receive more funding in that direction too. So the subjective assessment I make is that it is the responsibility of the Crown Agency, the New Zealand Transport Agency, actually to construct business cases for the 5 priorities we have clearly identified since 2016. And simply expecting the Rotorua Lakes Council to argue the business case on their behalf, I believe is non-viable, and actually it's incorrect. They are in charge of the state highways. They know our expectations. They know our demands. They know our growth patterns and their future development strategy. And therefore, the state highways are an integral component of our growth strategy. And therefore, when you look objectively at the distribution of available funds, at 90% in Tauranga and 2 or 3% in Rotorua, it seems to be, to any objective observer, unbalanced. So we need to continue to advocate, to redress that balance.
Are there any other pathways, I suppose, to address that imbalance of allocation?
Well, again, I express an opinion. We have a pathway, and myself and my chief executive will be meeting with the regional manager of NZTA, and will state that very clearly how to achieve it, but also your political voice as community representatives should be added to that voice, as to what we see to be an imbalanced approach into investment in the region.
Thank you, Stavros. Yes, something we all need to think about, how we can actually advocate a bit stronger for Rotorua in that area in particular.
Excuse me, Councillor Barrow, just before you progress, I think Mr Gaston would just like to add some comments.
Oh, great, thank you.
Look, I was just about to add a comment around that advocacy part, and as Mr Michaels has pointed out, we weren't the only ones who submitted on the imbalance to the investment in our district. The Chamber of Commerce and also our Economic Development Agency also made extremely strong submissions highlighting that imbalance and seeking an investment back into our community. So obviously there's two other groups who could join us in that sending additional messaging back regionally and into the NZTA.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions, if you'll indulge me, while we've got everyone here. Moving on to the East Rotorua sewage scheme, kaupapa. It's in there, it says, I'm not too sure what it actually means. The 50 whenua Māori properties will be addressed as legal matters are concluded. Can you expand on that for me, please?
Yeah, sure, Councillor Gore. I think, as we talked about before setting the targeted rate, there are about 50 properties that's whenua Māori means multiple owners. The one you go to identify the legally representative of those multiple owners to sign an agreement to install public infrastructure in their properties is not a straightforward case. And the legal background to who the rightful owners are and their legal responsibilities has to go through the Maori court for Maori land court and takes time. As we identify the legal owners, then we enter into an agreement with them, but we cannot, it's not an issue that can be forced. It's not an issue that can say we demand someone signs until the Maori land court defines who the legal owner is. So that's what I'm saying.
So there are currently 50 properties
it's about
outstanding
59.
or in that process?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now that's in my head. And my last question is just around the joint consent for the renewal of water supply takes. Hemo, I think it's Waipa, Hemo and the Rewarewa and also Karamu Tākina. Given the future development strategy and you know, plans for growth, I imagine that there'll be a little bit more, well, there should be more robust discussion, I suppose, around the water take. I do know in some places there are already sort of maxed out, for want of a better expression. What are the plans? What are your plans? What is the council's plans, I suppose, for when that eventual discussion happens? For instance, if one of our partners say, no, it's enough because they've watched their river or their stream or their spring, you know, slowly declining, obviously those kind of conversations are going to happen. So what's the plan, Stavros?
Thank you, Councillor Water. Just if I was able to address it by giving another example of how we've done it with Ngāti Waiwehi. How obviously there is a joint resource concerns for taking water from a puna up in Taniwha Springs. In order to define the maximum take from that spring, we work collaboratively with Ngāti Waiwehi to establish what we call, you probably understand it better than I do, the kaitiaki flows in Awahau. So that establishes your flow, the minimum flows in the stream. Anything above that, it's allowable by the consent. When it comes to Karamutekira and the other springs, the same approach will be will develop. What is the minimum residual flow that is desirable by iwi and environmental considerations in the lower Utahina stream, for example, and then we can only take water that's above that. So these are the approaches we are taking. Additional water might be required in Hamurana Springs, for example. There's a lot of water in that area, and if we need additional water in the future, we are working with Ngāti Rangiwehui at the moment. There is more than in excess of kaitiaki flows in that area, but again, it's a it's a mutual agreement to reach towards the Katiaki flow and how much more we can take from there. So hopefully we're working respectfully with each other, understand each other's expectations, and based on scientific and cultural evidence, we establish what the Katiaki flow, and of course that becomes the floor for which you cannot go below that.
I notice
Thank you, Stavros.
See, Moraes has something to add online there. Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Councillor Warrior. Really great strategic question that we do need to address together, and I haven't yet had the opportunity to work closely with Stavros on that long-term view. One thing I would add to what Stavros has said is growth doesn't necessarily mean taking more water if we can be more efficient with the water that we take. So there's a whole piece of work around minimising leaks, around being more targeted around how the water gets to where it's needed. So I just want to make the point that growth doesn't necessarily need to mean more extraction of the Earth's resources. There are opportunities to be much more judicious with its use, and that will be part of the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And just one more very quick question. Of our water suppliers in Rotorua, how many are have a joint consent to operate with iwi?
Currently one, the Taniwha Spring.
It's Taniwha Springs. Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kiriopa.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions through the chair, please. I noticed in the emissions reduction section, you've got the emissions reductions work being done by council was the enabling and encouraging active modes of transport. And I see the list is of education and safety programs. Can you clarify what work council is undertaking to enable active modes of transport locally, please?
Thank you, Councillor Kiriopa. Over the last 4 or 5 years, as you would understand, as you would know, we have built about 60 kilometers of new share paths, especially leading people from residential area to schools. When you look into the uptake of kids walking and cycling to schools, in some areas we have achieved 180 to 300% increases of kids not being dropped by car to school. They walk and cycle to schools. When you extrapolate that on an average day, it's about 6,000 less vehicle movements a day. So the provision of safe and practical infrastructure to enable about 18,000 school-age kids that go to and from schools is a significant contribution to that. Unfortunately, with this new National Land Transport Funding Program, which gives less priority to active modes of transports, I'm not entirely sure we'll be able to rely to continue to expand that safe network. And as I said earlier, I've got some concerns that the funding for minor safety improvements will be further reduced in September. And obviously that's a risk and a concern I have, and I will report back to you in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. And my second question, I see that a framework is to be developed to support the implementation of the Rotorua Climate Change Action Plan. When considering Council's sphere of
I can only give an indication of the tools you have as elected members. It's your control to approve the future development strategy, the district plan, and obviously within the district plan rules, you may want to encourage those elements of land use and activities. You have noted above. We also are responsible developing infrastructure related to that. And again, within our limitations of our infrastructure strategy, obviously we are supportive of that. However, if I may be perfectly frank too, I think there's also limitations to how much influence we have. But in terms of the regulatory and planning environment, you have the tools of your future development strategy, your sports and activity strategy, your district plan, your infrastructure strategy, the leverage, of allowing a business or a commercial activity to take, in certain places through the regulations of the district plan. I imagine the combined effect of that will have a contribution to the overall objectives of climate change. But I don't want to pretend that we're in control of all of these sort of things in 100%.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. Councillor Lee, you have a question, and then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. On page 34 of your report, you refer to the Council being fully compliant with the Water Services Drinking Water Standards Regulation, which for each of the 12 months just completed. It also says here that there's minute-by-minute data from the treatment plants. Does that minute-by-minute data, or any of the data that you collect, include the amount of naturally occurring fluoride in our water supplies?
No.
So we're not measuring that at all?
At this point, no.
Okay, but we will have to.
Well, if we want to ensure that, if the fluoridation system is activated sometime in next year, in March 25, we need to start, the installation is going to put the system into place. It needs to gather information that says you don't exceed the recommended dose of between 0.7 and 1, So we'll have to do that as part of the installation system. Okay. But at the moment, we don't do it.
Okay, so the directives have been put in place without considering that. Interesting. By the way, just following on from Councillor Patterson's question about the central water supply, I've also had similar questions. Would you be able to tell us where that comes from and which areas of town are serviced by that?
Well, I can't, but I can, as Councillor Patterson requested earlier, we should put some maps out there. We'll clearly mark central and eastern supply. I mean, I can't describe it on a street by street at this point in time, but obviously we're able to put a map.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll look forward to that, Matt, to answer some of those questions, hopefully.
Great. Page 29. Of the agenda, proposed sewer alignment through the Sanitarium Reserve not supported by iwi. Is this the Ngāti Whakaui Gifted Reserves Protocol Committee?
It's not a committee. The Sanitarium Reserves, is controlled. It's Ngāti Whakaui land. And like I've said earlier, with regards to Maori whenua in Rotoiti or any landowner, if we propose to put a public infrastructure through the land that is owned by an individual or a group of individuals, I think the legal framework and I suppose the polite way is to have an agreement with the landowner as to what we want to put in that property. So at this point in time, the Ngāti Whakaui advise us that they do not prefer the pipeline to go through that area. We are working with them to find an alternative bypass route to do that. The objective of the pipeline is basically to ensure wastewater flows to the treatment plant are not constrained by pumping capacity or pipeline capacity. The question is that where is the route that pipeline needs to go through? We have an obligation to consult with the landowners, and get their permission to do so, and that's what we're doing at the moment.
Isn't the Sanitarium Reserve a gifted reserve?
Well, it's gifted reserve, but it's also under the Katiaki stewardship of Ngāti Whakaui.
Sorry,
it's gifted for a certain purpose, but it's not gifted, for putting infrastructure pipelines.
Thank you. Is there any further questions from you, Councillor Lee?
Yeah, so this is going to end up taking a longer route in that case. Is that the story?
Possibly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for agreeing to look into those maps. I think they will be very helpful for our community to understand which areas are involved in the first tranche and those areas that will be in the second tranche for fluoridation. My question actually is a supplementary one carrying on from Councillor O'Brien's point. If we cast our minds back to when we had the presentation from the Regional Director of NZTA, he made his thoughts quite clear, which I noted Mayor Tapsell was most unhappy about with regards to their approach to funding for our roads. Tenai was going to get the lion's share of it because they view that direction is the way our community should be travelling to Tauranga and all points west. And Nongataha were not going to get any further support on those lines from the way I read him. So my question is, if the Watchment development in Nongataha by the stream there at Wairatī, was there a levy put on that development in order to pay for the road change, or who's going to pay that roading upgrade in out at Nongataha to make that accessible from the development?
Well, I think you currently do have a development contributions policy, and that development contribution policy defines what we levying in development. If some areas of additional investment needs to be considered into the development contributions policy, then that's something we have to consider. However, again, we need to be, in my opinion, we really need to allow the seizures unto the seizures. NZTA controls the state highway. They have an obligation to provide a state highway a corridor that is functional and is safe for use. And my personal opinion is that NZTA has to take ownership of that responsibility and work with us in that kind of direction. If we get frustrated in the direction, then we can perhaps consider other funding instruments, for these activities. But if we start charging our property developers for activities that we shouldn't be charging them, what are we doing? We're discouraging development because some other agency don't want to do what they're supposed to do. That's not my view. That's my personal view.
Just carrying on from that, because he made it quite clear that if we put together and enable our future development strategy without their support of the roading, that was going to be on us. It's our problem to deal with. So what are we going to do about that?
Well, my discussion with my chief executive and NZTA regional manager, I would refer him to the government's policy statement. What is the function of the State Highway Agency? And if you look into the function of the State Highway Agency, is to enable growth. If they want to walk away from that, well, then that's something they have to review what the GPS means to them.
Thank you.
Mr. Gaston to actually add some comments to that.
Yeah, just adding, and I suspect the Chief Executive would add something else additional to that. NZTA have been a participant. They're a technical participant in our future development strategy process, so they have had input into all the growth areas identified in our future development strategy. And so they are aware of where we saw growth needing to go. I would also pick up on the references to the development site that's been discussed. All sites where they interact with the state highway are often required to do a traffic assessment, and they need to negotiate directly with NZTA about access onto the state highways. You've seen that with commercial developments, with lights having to be installed as a consequence. So they are contributing to their interface with the state highway, but I would again support what Mr. Michaels has said, which is NZTA is aware of our growth areas. We do highlight to them where growth is occurring, and outside of that site there is a number of sites that contribute to the greater catchment for Nongataha, so it is an increasing pressure point that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, JP. And I see that Andrew has his hand up as well. Would you like to add some comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Totally reinforce the comments of Stavros and JP. I guess two things I'd say is, one is council staff are working on the understanding that we stay in our lane and NZTA stays in theirs. So that improvements to the State Highway Corridor are NZTA's responsibility, and we continue to advocate for them to spend the appropriate funds on State Highway improvements and not council funds. That's our assumption. If that, the only way we would take a different view to that is through the annual plan, if council decides to allocate specific funds to its State Highway improvements. In the absence of that, we're proceeding on the basis that we are not putting our ratepayer funds into state highways. Those are NZTA's improvements. The second part of it is what I'm hearing from this is perhaps a need for us to bring NZTA to this table more frequently to hear some of these concerns of our community more directly. And I think absolutely we've got a role in that. As Stavros has mentioned, he and I are meeting with Regional Director of NZTA, and perhaps that's something that becomes part of our discussions with them, is how do we bring NZTA decision makers closer into this council and our public to hear the concerns we've got around the level of investment in state highways in our rohi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and given the conversation that's just happened around this table today, I think it would be most helpful when you have your discussions that you highlight that might be agreeable to the council as well. Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillors? Yes, Councillor Waru.
Thank you for your indulgence. I forgot to ask one more question when I had my turn, so it might be a bit of a hard one, but it's okay. I know Stavros can handle. In terms of the Rotorua border control, are we still in discussions? Are we still working on that relationship, or is it because of legal proceedings we've kind of muzzled?
Thank you, Councillor Waro. I think our standing policy and approach is to safeguard, reinforce, and strengthen our relationship with all Manawhenua. With the Board of Control, obviously, we've got some differing opinions. As a council, as elected members, you have a much wider view about, serving a whole range of other objectives too. I mean, our hand is always extended to the Board of Control to work collaboratively. We're not really taking any actions that's in any way aggressive, in that direction. All we have asked to do is to be permitted to do the work we're legally entitled to do on the road to protect the Lake Tarawera water quality and the health of the community. And we advise them that we're happy to discuss with them any options that will make their view more constructive or easier to make. It takes two parties to work on that direction, but our approach is that we have no interest in having a confrontational relationship with anybody else, as you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. Yeah, I just would encourage that pathway, just to keep on that and encourage to get that relationship right. Thank you. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. Just noting that we had a query earlier on about the dangerous dam policy. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm only raising it, sorry, Stavros, as a minor matter, not addressed in your report. I noticed that Regional Council are having hearings, I believe, next week on the dangerous dams policy. I looked through the submissions and I couldn't see anything from us. Are you able to tell me how many sites come under that we control come under the policy?
None that I know of, Councillor O'Brien. As you recall, we built 2 dams in Linton Park East and West, for which we had to obtain building consents and meet the new standards. Morris Street dams, again, we did that, and we had to build, the new standards. Basically, those, this policy of the Regional Council relates to dams that got 4 meters height and contain more than 20,000 cubic meters of water. And like any other earthquake-related, structural policy, as information comes to light, people who operate these kind of dams, they need to retrospectively apply for consents to make sure the structural stability and the safety of that. Again, that was driven by the Cyclone Gabriel in Hawke's Bay, where a number of those dams in farmlands and in the Regional Council's responsibility appeared to be not stable enough. in our Rohi, in our district, we've got these two dams that fall into this policy statement. We've got building consents for both of them. It costs us money, obviously, but I'm not aware of any other facility that requires that retrospective consenting at this point in time.
Thank you. So you're comfortable we were not required to put in a submission, either supporting the policy or suggesting changes. We're happy with the policy as is.
Yeah, you're happy with the policy because it's the same as the Building Act. You can make a submission against 70 or 37% earthquake standards or not. The policy is a policy, and it's a national policy.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. There looks to be no further questions, councillors. So thank you, Stavros and Rob, for your report and answering the questions. We'll now move on to item 7.2. That's on page 40 of your agendas, councillors. Could I ask for a mover and a seconder that the report Major Capital Projects Update be received, please? It's Councillor O'Brien, seconded by Councillor Wang. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? That is carried. I'd like to welcome Thomas and Stuart, who are here today to answer any questions and add any detail to the report that you have.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors. So this is the first of many upcoming reports to this committee with regards to our progress, I guess, against some of our key major capital projects. So this month we will be introducing the museum, and in coming months we'll be looking to introduce further projects such as the wastewater treatment plant, the IF, etc. Happy to take the report as read, and Stuart is with us here at the moment. He's just come back across from the museum where he's been meeting with the architects and the engineers, and are happy to answer any questions that the members may have.
Thank you, Thomas. Was there anything you would like to add, Stuart? Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions? It appears that the report was very thorough. Yes, but Councillor Waru has a question.
Thank you. Can't let you get away with nothing there, but just wanted to ask around, you just mentioned the coming out from the architects, and I actually did, that was sort of before my iPad clapped out, I actually had a question around the design part of the process. Are they on track in terms of the overall project at this point?
Kia ora, Councillor. Yes, we are on track. There are certain parts of the project that are ahead of schedule, which are clear around earthquake strengthening in zones 1 and 2.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, thank you both for your very helpful report. Gentlemen, could I just ask it's on page 43 of our agenda, just the budgeted expenditure, there was a variance there by the requirement to obtain contract works insurance that sits outside the main construction budget. Sorry, could you just explain that for me, and is that a major going forward, Thomas, or is this a one-off as far as the budget goes and requiring this insurance further? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that was a variation that's come through. Unfortunately, when we produced the estimated final cost for council approval, unfortunately the QS didn't include the intended insurance cover in place. And we've now got that insurance cover in place like we always intended, but it's obviously now eaten a little bit into our contingency. What we will do as well going forward is just have probably a section in the confidential component of this committee, because there is an element around how the contingency is being used. We obviously don't share publicly what the contingency is because we don't want the contractors to aim for that. But what we have had is we've had 3 items that have moved. One has moved with regards to the contract insurance against the budget, but we've had 2 positive wins as well with regards to savings in a piece of work that has come in about 100,000 less than expected, and Watson and Hughes, as they're firming up contract prices for future work in the program, have identified some savings as well. So we've got about $300,000 of savings in this month as well that have now offset against, and we will probably continue to have those sorts of elements, but what we'll do is we'll look to provide you with an update going forward and confidential to provide you with that transparency.
Thank you, Thomas. Very helpful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Thomas. It'll be great to have that information next time round. Councillor Waru, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now I've got power. There was a question that I was going to ask as well, and it was just around the, as the project's been going, Stuart, you might be the one to answer this. Has there been anything that we didn't foresee happening come up?
Thank you, Councillor. Look, there's always things going to come up, and they come up on almost a daily basis, to be honest. But so far, they've all been minor. We have had like a discovery, for instance, of a sewer line that's not on any plans. They're not on any as-built plans. These are relating to the sports dome going back to the 60s and 70s. It's not a major, but they're the sorts of things that we will find as the project goes on, but nothing significant so far.
Thank you for that. Nice little treasure hunt at times, isn't it? So, Kapai, no, that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. I just have one question, Stuart, around the mechanical plant room. There's been a delayed start. Is there any context you can give around the reasons why and how it's going?
Yes, certainly. So the foundations for the plant room are to do, one, with the sewage pipe that I've just spoken about that needs to be relocated. There were a number of redundant geothermal pipes also discovered in the footprint of the building, and we're also just addressing this morning a large Jenison power cable not quite in the location that we thought it was. So they're not majors in terms we have solutions for those, and I've got to say that one of the benefits of having the engineers rep or the clerk of works on site, we're able to address these issues immediately as they turn up.
Great to hear. Thank you very much. Are there any further questions, councillors? No, in that case, I'll just say thank you very much, Stuart, for coming in this morning. Thank you, Thomas, for that report. Most helpful. I look forward to the confidential reports going forward as well. I suggest, councillors, that we might just move into public excluded and then maybe break for morning tea if you're open to having a break then. So the reasons that we would propose moving into public excluded is for the confidential minutes of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee that were held on the 3rd of July. Also 8.2 is a tender approval contract 24006, the geothermal bores. And the reason that we would go into public excluded would be under section 48. The public conduct of the relevant part of the proceedings of the meeting would be likely to result in the disclosure of information for which good reason would be for withholding would exist under section 6 or 7, and it would unreasonably prejudice the commercial position of the person who supplied or who is the subject of the information. Do I have a mover and a seconder to move into public excluded? Thank you, Councillor Waru. Seconded by Councillor Kai Fong. All those in favour, please say aye.
Madam Chair,
yes.
Could I just ask a question, please?
Yes.
The Ombudsman's report has indicated that when we are wishing to move into public excluded, we shouldn't be just referring to a part of the legislation of the Local Government Official Informations and Meetings Act, but we should be providing some plain English as to why this particular item applies to that particular part of the Act. And we seem to be some 10 months on from the Ombudsman's report and still not complying with this aspect.
I'll get Una to provide a reply to that for you.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, there are a number of actions that we're still working through on the Ombudsman report. This is one of them. I'm part of a working group that has actually been working on trying to put the standing orders in plain English. So this will follow that, and it is a relatively difficult thing to do, to be looking at putting a lot of legal jargon into plain English. It is on our work list, and we will be addressing it as soon as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we've had a mover and a seconder that we move into public excluded on the grounds contained in section 48. Part 1 of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you. We'll just break now for 15 minutes or so. Come back at about 11:15.